Principle number 1 is construct a dedicated team which is distinct and separate from the performance engine. While you want to build a dedicated team which is distinct and separate, it cannot be isolated from the performance engine. Then there is no reason why New York Times should be launching New York Times Digital. There is some assets of the performance engine that can be leveraged for the benefit of New York Times Digital. Again, think about what are some of the assets of the performance engine that can go to benefit New York Times Digital. Certainly you can use the brand, the New York Times brand. You can use the content. They have phenomenal content. Not just content that day, they have 100 years of digital archives. No Silicon Valley startup could aspire for that depth of content. Certainly they have relationship with advertisers. That is a huge asset. I want you to think about the following. When certain assets of the performance engine goes to benefit the New York Times Digital, will that create conflicts? And you would agree with me, there is possibility for all kinds of conflicts here. For instance, suppose you have a common sales force that is selling advertising between New York Times printed newspaper and New York Times Digital. Now, I can at least see 3 types of conflicts here. Conflict number 1 could be they just don't have time to sell the New York Times Digital ad. You probably thought that the sales force had 10% slack. Maybe they don't have 10% slack. So when you added up the New York Times Digital job onto them, earlier they were doing 1 job, now they are doing 2 jobs, and they don't have slack. So purely they are overworked, therefore they don't cooperate. That's one type of conflict. The second type of conflict is the sales force may have slack, let us say 10% slack, and that's what is needed to support the sales for the digital medium. But that 10% slack is not there every minute of the day. So the time when the New York Times Digital come to request the time of the sales force may be exactly the same moment that they are 100% busy with the performance engine's task. That's another type of conflict. A third type of conflict is, as a salesman, you may be afraid that if I open the door, suppose New York Times printed newspaper has a long relationship with General Electric. If you open the door and allow General Electric to advertise also on New York Times Digital, you are afraid it may cannibalize your sales, which is clearly giving you a very high margin when GE takes a full-page ad on the newspaper. So there's going to be all kinds of conflicts. The conflicts could be for resources, for time, could be for management attention. And I want you to think about this. Conflicts are real, conflicts are legitimate, conflicts will happen. And when conflicts happen, if you ignore those minor tensions, they will become major rivalries. If you ignore those major rivalries between the box 1 and the box 3 businesses, then those major rivalries will emerge into significant hostilities. And if you ignore those significant hostilities, it may turn into outright war. This is incidentally the innovation team. And here is the performance engine. And if there is an outright war between the performance engine and the innovation team, if there is a tug of war, who's going to win that war? Unless that lady happens to be extraordinarily strong. You know the performance engine will win it every time. Why? Because there are more people in the performance engine. They are bringing you short-term profits, therefore they can justify their case based on improvements in short-term performance. Instead of this, if you can view this as a partnership as opposed to a war, suddenly the picture changes. How do you cultivate this partnership? That is the essence of the borrow challenge.